Hi, my name is Saif, and I will be sharing a brief presentation on Indigenous health and wellness, focusing on how physical activity engagement is shaped by culture, family, and leadership. I've drawn from Australian, American, and Canadian Indigenous research and perspectives to highlight three key messages that can guide culturally appropriate physical activity promotion. So, why focus on exercise in Indigenous health? Indigenous populations in Canada experience a high burden of chronic disease, and physical inactivity is a major contributor. However, we know that physical activity supports not just physical, but also mental, emotional, and spiritual well being, which are all components of the Indigenous medicine wheel. Understanding the unique social, cultural, and systemic barriers and motivators in physical activity in Indigenous contexts is essential to creating programs that will get people out and moving. So, my first key message is that physical activity in Indigenous communities is rarely seen as an individual pursuit. In a recent study done in Saskatoon, Canada, Indigenous individuals who exercise with family or friends reported significantly higher activity levels. Similarly, across US and Australian Indigenous communities, exercise is often woven into family life, whether through shared chores, gardening, or traditional outdoor activities. These activities not only promote physical movement, but also strengthen family bonds and pass on cultural knowledge, creating a form of resilience through connection. My second key message is that land and culture are deeply embedded in how many Indigenous people engage in physical activity. In Australian Indigenous populations, preferred activities often include walkabouts, bushwork, or cultural practices tied to the land and not structured gym workouts. The natural environment is also seen as not only safer, but also more culturally meaningful space, since they offer us a place where people can connect with their identity, community, and the land itself. I wanted to note that Western exercise settings, like gyms or fitness studios, can create space of disconnect from Indigenous experiences. As a result, they often miss the cultural context that makes movement more than just exercise. And programs that ignore this context may fail to resonate with an Indigenous person. My third message is that mentorship matters. In a Canadian study, Métis participants with physical activity mentors to guide and support their physical activity journey were significantly more active. Beyond individual relationships, mentorship and peer support can be great motivators. They create social accountability and belonging, which are especially important in cultures where wellness is deeply relational. My last point was that spaces can be designed specifically for Indigenous youth and communities. For example, sports and mentorship programs would benefit with Indigenous values, leadership, and cultural strengths because programs are not just about activity, but also about identity, pride, and empowerment. Now, to conclude my presentation and to wrap up, we must understand physical activity is not just a health intervention, but a culturally embedded practice. If we center family, community, land, and Indigenous leadership in program design, we can help make movement a form of healing and reconnection to one's own Indigenous identity. That's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening. These are my references, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.